Imagine being quiet in your bedroom when suddenly a giant, evil face appears in your closet and satanic heads try to devour you alive. Today we will recap the story of a movie based on Junji Ito's first work, called Tomie Unlimited, from 2011. Tsukiko is a high school student who loves taking pictures, and so she joined the school's photography club. One day after class, she is photographing a construction project that is taking place at the school when she is interrupted by Yoshi, her best friend. While the girls are talking, Tomie, who is the protagonist's older sister, leaves the conversation she was having with Toshio and runs towards the two. As soon as the trio reunites, Tsukiko starts to take some pictures of the young woman, but suddenly a steel cross falls from the building under construction and hits Tomie's shoulder, crossing her body and causing a river of blood to gush out of her mouth and eyes, eliminating her instantly. Seeing her sister perish right in front of her, Tsukiko goes into shock and screams in despair. Even after more than a year since the day of the accident, the young photographer has been having recurring nightmares about her sister's elimination, and the day that was supposed to be Tomie's 18th birthday is no different. Tsukiko wakes up scared after another of her nightmares and ends up drawing the attention of her parents, who rush to the room to see if everything was okay with. After making sure everything was okay, at the request of her husband, Kimiko, who is the mother of the girls, bakes a birthday cake and buys some items to make a party in honor of her late daughter. After the family sings happy birthday, Masashi, the girl's father, asks Tsukiko to blow out the candles. Soon after the tribute, the young woman receives a call from Yoshi saying that Toshio is inviting her to rejoin the photography club. Toshio is Tsukiko's crush. It was with him that Tomie was talking on the day of the accident. Anyway, before she even has a chance to respond to her friend's invitation, someone starts ringing the doorbell and the girl has to end the call to answer the door. As she approaches the entrance and asks who was on the other side, Tsukiko is startled to hear her sister's voice in response. Not knowing what to do, the girl runs to her parents and says that someone outside is pretending to be Tomie. As the couple approaches, the person on the other side recognizes Kimiko's voice and starts talking to her. With his family frightened, Masashi goes to the door, and when he opens it, everyone is extremely surprised and thrilled to see that it was really Tomie, who was alive right in front of them. Happy to have their daughter back, the couple breaks the cake and gives it to the girl, who has a very different personality than before, demanding expensive food and even breaking the photo Tsukiko took of her moments before the accident. The next morning, the young photographer gets up and walks to the table to have her breakfast, where she finds her sister eating a real feast, while her father smells and licks Tomie's hair in a totally grotesque way. After being caught, Masashi tries to explain himself by saying that it is because of the longing he felt for the girl and accuses Tsukiko of not seeming happy about her sister's return. Frightened by that scene and without understanding what was happening, the young woman runs to her room. A few hours later, Tsukiko smells something burning and begins to follow the source of the odor, which leads her outside her house, where she finds her mother burning all the family photos on the grill and, wanting to save them, takes the kitchen tongs from Kimiko's hand and manages to retrieve some. When asking her mother why, the woman says that Tomie asked to destroy the photographs. According to her, the images are of no importance and decided to destroy them all. The girl begins to pull the photo that was in Tsukiko's hand, starting a dispute of strength that the older sister ends up winning, and with the impulse ends up being thrown back, hitting her back on a wooden wall. Masashi hears Tomie's scream and runs to where the girls were. When he arrives, the man sees the scene and slaps his own daughter in the face after being convinced by his firstborn that it was all Tsukiko's fault. After all this situation, the family goes inside the house, and believing that the girl was not punished enough, Tomie cuts the iron wire and orders her father to whip her sister. Masashi then orders his wife to hold her while he does the job, even with his daughter crying and asking him to stop. The man continues to assault her until Tomie, who was watching coldly, tells him to stop because he could end up eliminating the girl, who at that moment was fainting. After all that brutality, Tsukiko goes to the bathtub and is followed by her sister, who, after making her get beaten, decides to take a bath with her. While the two talk, the bathroom light starts to flash several times and finally goes out completely. Frightened, the wounded young woman tries to run away, but is stopped by Tomie, who approaches and removes the hair covering her scar, which is wide open, forming a mouth, with a bizarre tongue sticking out. As if the little tongue wasn't enough, the wound turns into a huge tumor, forming a completely deformed face that gives a very sinister laugh. Frightened by all this bizarreness, Tsukiko sticks her finger in the eyes of this disgusting thing and runs desperately to her parents, where she tells everything that happened and says that that was not her sister but a monster. Even seeing the girl's desperation, the couple don't believe her, and Masashi once again beats his youngest daughter. Tired of playing there, Tomie says she will go to her house and ridicules the couple for thinking she was really their daughter. Annoyed to see the girl leave, Masashi goes crazy and starts stabbing Tomie, causing blood to spurt all over the food on the table. After eliminating her, the couple takes the body to the bathroom and starts dividing it, storing the remains in plastic bags. While they finish the job, Tsukiko looks at Tomie's severed head and sees her eyes moving. With the fright, the girl ends up drawing the attention of her mother, who already imagines what is happening and to put an end to it, begins to pierce the creature's face and throws it in a dumpster. With exhaustion, the family ends up falling asleep in the midst of all that blood, and in the morning, Tsukiko wakes up and starts cleaning up to go to school. In the middle of a kind of trance, Kimiko begins to prepare the girl's meal, still totally dirty, and while she is putting the food in a pot, a piece of Tomie's meat falls into the rice without the woman realizing it. At school, Tsukiko and Yoshi are talking, when their teacher says that the class will have a new classmate, and as soon as the student arrives in the room, the young woman realizes that the classmate was actually Tomie, more alive than ever. On her lunch break, Yoshi tells her friend to eat while she prepares some tea, but when Tsukiko unwraps her lunch, she sees that in the lunchbox there are some little Tomie heads. Apparently, the piece of meat that fell into the pot earlier has multiplied to form these faces. Startled by the sight, the girl runs to the trash can where she ends up throwing her lunch, and after losing her appetite, decides to go to her class. Worried about her friend, Yoshi starts looking for her, and when she approaches the place where Tsukiko threw her lunchbox, she starts to hear whispers calling her name. Believing it was her best friend, the girl follows the sound until she finds the pot moving on its own, and upon opening it, Yoshi sees the various miniature heads that open their mouths and fuse their tongues, forming a larger and disgusting one, which they shove into the girl's mouth, choking her till elimination. At the girl's house, Masashi is dozing in his chair when he is woken up by a voice calling him. When looking for the source of the sound, the man sees Tomie's head coming out of the trash can and starts talking to her, who convinces him that his wife and daughter are manipulating him. Back at school, at Toshio's request, Tsukiko takes her camera and goes to the school's judo gym to take some pictures, and while the girl does the favor, Tomie shows up to challenge the fighters. After easily beating one of the students, the coach tells Toshio to fight the challenger, but he is too shocked to do it, and taking advantage of the gap, she knocks the young man down and starts kissing him in front of everyone. Saddened to see the young man she loves kissing another, Tsukiko returns home to find her father acting very strangely. After trying to help him, the girl asks for her mother, but the man replies that the woman had left. After managing to lose his daughter, Masashi goes to Tomie's head and starts feeding her with some plants to help her recover her body. Even with the herbs, the floating head convinces Masashi that it's not enough, and thanks to the man's low mental sanity, manages to manipulate him into eliminating Kimiko with that same wire he whipped Tsukiko with. After that, Tomie manages to convince the man to serve him the remains of his own wife to ingest more nutrients and help with recovery. As Masashi cuts out his former companion's tongue, the head starts to giggle for her, seeing the suffering of a person by mutilating someone they love as something extremely funny. The next day, Tsukiko goes to her school's darkroom to develop the photos, and while she's finishing the process, she realizes that one image Tomie has taken has a distortion right where the scar is. While Tsukiko is looking at the picture, Yoshi arrives behind her and after a very strange conversation, shows her that she also has a bizarre wound with a hellish face on her shoulder, making her run away. Determined to find her friend, the young woman begins to chase her and ends up arriving in a room where the judo athletes were, who are in a kind of trance and believing that she is Tomie, begin to attack her until they rip her head off with a pair of grass shears. After committing such a crime, the young men begin to wash, when Yoshi's body begins to rise, and we can see that the tumor that was already not very beautiful is now replacing the girl's head, making this thing bigger and even uglier, in addition to being able to freely control its movements. Seeing this bizarre scene, the students panic and are paralyzed with fear as they observe the hooded creature, which begins to struggle madly and runs towards them, but for some reason, this thing deviates its route and returns to look for Tsukiko while being chased by the fighters. Determined to find its target, this monster eliminates its pursuers and returns to its quest. While running away from Yoshi, Tsukiko hears Toshio's voice coming from the art room and upon entering, finds the young man in a trance stabbing Tomie's body. Upon hearing the girl's voice, the young man regains consciousness and is horrified to realize what he has done. When Tsukiko pulls him to try to convince him to get out of there, a new Tomie forms from the pool of blood on the floor and starts kissing him. Filled with rage at seeing the young man she loves together with that monster once again, Tsukiko picks up the blade Toshio was using a few seconds ago and strikes the young man several times, freeing him from this terrible nightmare. After eliminating the young man, Tsukiko sticks the blade into Tomie's forehead, making the creature's body turn back into a heap of blood, but the girl has no time to celebrate. As soon as she lets go of the knife, Yoshi's decapitated body arrives in the room and runs at her. With nowhere to run, Tsukiko ends up locking herself in the locker room and looking around. She sees a very suspicious white sheet covering something, and when the cloth falls, we see that it is the trash can where Tomie's head is, which starts to come out. Here we see that the mixture of exotic herbs with human flesh helped the monster to rebuild its body, but in a totally bizarre way, with several small heads joined by some kind of plant. Frightened, Tsukiko ends up being trapped against the wall, and when she tries to run, Tomie's body that was stabbed by Toshio comes out of the closet and tries to catch her, but as she tries to retreat, the girl finds herself trapped, as Yoshi's decapitated body appears behind her. Tomie is a creature that each time you try to eliminate it, the body that was wounded remains alive, and to make matters worse, it still multiplies. When Tsukiko is about to be caught by the mad versions of Tomie, she ends up waking up in her bed and goes to the dining room where she finds her parents having breakfast. When telling them about the nightmare she had with her sister, the couple laughs at the girl, saying that she is an only child. At that moment, the girl looks at the portraits around the house and sees that Tomie was not in any of them. Could it be that all this chaos from the beginning was just a bad dream? Unfortunately not. Kimiko gets up and starts walking towards the kitchen, but when she is coming, she turns to Tsukiko and tells her never to forget Tomie. At that moment, her father takes the newspaper out of front of his face, and we can see him compulsively eating a few locks of hair. Kimiko, who is now with her face inverted and mutilated, takes a knife and starts chasing her daughter, who even tries to run, but is held by Masashi. As the couple threaten to leave the girl in pieces, a giant portrait of Tomie falls from the ceiling and begins to watch, but just as Tsukiko is about to be eliminated, a centipede with faces all over its body and hair in place of paws appears and bites Masashi's neck, ripping out his jugular and causing him to perish from hemorrhaging. With her husband eliminated, the Kimiko of the deep web starts stalking the girl, and when they are in a grapple, another one of those centipedes appears and gets in between the woman's legs, devouring her from the inside out. Trying to escape the creatures, Tsukiko runs to the second floor, but in the middle of the stairs she meets Toshio, who tries to push her, but ends up falling and being devoured by several centipedes. When she arrives on the first floor, Yoshi appears and tries to do the same, but falls, and when she arrives on the lower floor, her body is broken in half by the monsters. Arriving on the second floor, Tsukiko runs to her room and tries to close the door, but something strong stops her, throwing her away. The girl looks at the entrance and is faced with the gigantic face of Tomie, who begins a brief conversation. Tired of it all and knowing that there is no escape, the young woman decides to give herself up to Tomie and her centipedes, who begin to crawl over her body. Finally, Tsukiko is shown leaving her house, but with Tomie's appearance, and while walking through the streets, she observes the people around her, noticing that a good part of them also look like her older sister. While walking down the sidewalk, the girl meets a man who seems to know her and starts to follow him. Later we get to see Tsukiko in Tomie's body being murdered by the same young man in an apartment. While lying on the floor, the girl looks into the mirror and the reflection asks her if she was finally feeling satisfied. This is Tomie's curse, an evil spirit that condemns women who are envious of her beauty to live in her body for eternity, being attacked by men who are attracted by her appearance, and because they cannot relate to her, end up eliminating her. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, please like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.